Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 96 based on novel. So let's start. Hey, little brother, what's up? 50,000 spirit coins. It's definitely worth the news for Xiao Yang. At that time, as long as you catch Xiao Yang and bring him to the 4 main doors, your contribution will be enough to make you have enough to eat and wear all your life. The wretched young man looked at Xiao Yang years ago with a smile. He didn't know that the words in his mouth made the people in front of him laugh at him. Hehe, but in that case, you know that as long as you catch this Xiao Yang and take him to the front of the 4 main doors, you can have enough to eat and wear all your life, but why don't you catch Xiao Yang yourself? Xiao Yang's mouth was filled with a smile. He also looked at the wretched youth in front of him with a smile. His tone was full of fun. Hey. Well, actually, Xiao Yang is in a weak period now. Half a month ago, he experienced a big war, which hurt him a lot. In order to recover his injury quietly, he chose to retreat into the Shaolin Mountains. Now, he is healing in a hidden place in the Shaolin Mountains. Although I know where he is, but unfortunately, after all, I'm not strong enough and I'm not his opponent. I was forced to flee several times. I even almost died in his hands, so I had no choice but to sell the news, alas. The obscene man was unwilling to tell the experience between him and Xiao Yang, but he didn't know it. Xiao Yang was right in front of him. He didn't dare to imagine. At this time, Xiao Yang said his identity. What a wonderful expression would be on the obscene man's face. Hearing the words of the obscene man in front of him, Xiao Yang couldn't help laughing. On his face, he still kept a calm look. With a slight smile, Xiao Yang turned his eyes slightly, showed a suspicious look on his face, and asked the obscene man again. Oh, according to what you say, do you mean that you had a hand with Xiao Yang? Hearing Xiao Yang's words, the expression on the obscene man's face immediately stretched out and looked at Xiao Yang with a smile. The expression on his face seemed to tell Xiao Yang that it was true. Hehe, to be honest with my little brother, I had made hands with Xiao Yang several times. Although he was seriously injured at that time, it's a pity that half emperor is half emperor. I'm not an opponent after all. Although I escaped from death every time, Xiao Yang didn't suffer less in my hands. I even unloaded his finger. The words fell. It seemed that he was afraid that Xiao Yang didn't believe it. The obscene man actually took out a yellow phalanx from the ring and put it in front of Xiao Yang. Seeing this scene, Xiao Yang couldn't help coughing twice. I have to say that these swindlers have many means. They have all kinds of deceptive equipment. They even have fake finger bones. Looking at the color of the finger bones, it seems that it has been more than 10 years. He unexpectedly said that it was forcibly unloaded in the war with Xiao Yang not long ago. It's shameless enough. Hey, little brother, you should believe it now. I tell you secretly that Xiao Yang is hurt now. As long as you buy my news and find him, you can easily kill him. Hey, 50,000 ling coins for a lifetime of prosperity and wealth. Little brother, you've made a lot of money. The obscene man looked at Xiao Yang with a smile. His words revealed a faint sense of envy. It seems that the news is really like what he said, which can bring glory and wealth to Xiao Yang. I have to say that from the point of deception alone, the technology of the obscene man in front of him is quite first class. He is not only well equipped, but also can control the changes in his face and the mood fluctuations in his heart. If he were someone else today, he would be cheated. But unfortunately, what the wretched man didn't know was that Xiao Yang, who was with him in his mouth, stood in front of him with a joking smile at this moment, with a sneer in his heart. Hehe, although what you said is good, I think it's all right. Since you have said that Xiao Yang can beat you back several times in succession when he is seriously injured, and even nearly kill you, if I go, in case I die in his hands, won't this 50,000 spirit coins be in vain? When the corner of his mouth was hooked, Xiao Yang smiled, but he shrugged helplessly at the obscene man in front of him. It seemed that Xiao Yang, who was seriously injured but still had spare strength, was quite afraid. Hearing the words in Xiao Yang's mouth, the obscene man couldn't help frowning. He didn't expect that the black-robed man in front of him dared not buy it after all his words. Even so, the obscene man still didn't want to stop. He said so much today. Anyway, he must take the 50,000 spirit coins, take it out of the pocket of the young man in black. Hehe, little brother, don't worry. After several wars between me and Xiao Yang, the consumption of Xiao Yang is great. Now Xiao Yang is at the end of a powerful crossbow. As long as you dare to fight him, Xiao Yang will surely become the soul of your men. Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang's frown still didn't stretch. Seeing this, the obscene man couldn't help scolding Xiao Yang, but in the end, he swallowed a mouthful of saliva, took a deep breath, encouraged Xiao Yang again, and said, "Little brother, you can't miss such a good opportunity right now. As long as you hook your fingers, you can kill Xiao Yang, and then you can sit in glory. At that time, there will be all kinds of powerful beauties. Now, let you do such a simple thing. What can you worry about?" "Heh. Okay. I'll take it." As soon as the words in the obscene man's mouth fell, Xiao Yang immediately shouted, which attracted the eyes of many people in the store. When they saw the obscene man, they were disdainful. Then they looked at Xiao Yang with a little pity and turned back. Obviously, many of these people in the field have been fooled by this obscene man. The obscene man had no time to take into account the eyes of others in the store. After Xiao Yang's words fell, the expression on his face immediately became a surprise. A pair of small eyes showed a deep color of greed, and his heart was full of ridicule for Xiao Yang in front of him. "Hey, it's easy to cheat. If I can find Xiao Yang, how can I get the baby from you? What a fool, ha ha." The wretched man didn't notice the sarcasm in his heart. While mocking Xiao Yang in his heart, Xiao Yang also sneered at him. Hey, my little brother is really a decisive person. I like to deal with people like you and do things readily, ha ha ha." The wretched man laughed. While talking, he took out a sheepskin map from the ring in his hand and wanted to deliver it to Xiao Yang. "Wait." The sudden voice of words in the field made Xiao Yang's face look slightly shocked. The obscene man in front of him was also stunned. Then Xiao Yang returned to his mind and looked at the place where the voice came from with doubts. Where Xiao Yang came into view, a young man in a brocade robe was walking slowly forward from the opposite side of Xiao Yang. His handsome face had a look of pride. On the left and right sides, an old man in a grey robe followed him to protect the safety of the young man. Under Xiao Yang's soul exploration, the strength of the young man is not weak. He has reached the level of 3 stars and half emperors. This cultivation talent can be called a real genius among his peers. As for the 2 grey-robed elders beside the man, their strength is naturally not weak compared with the former. These 2 elders seem to be 8-star and half emperors. The strength of one of them has even reached the peak level of the late 8-star and half emperors. Even if it is a step away from breaking through the 9-star and half emperors. As for the other, although his strength is no better than the former, he is an 8-star and a half emperor after all. This strength, placed in Sangmu town, is already the existence of a peak strong man. Although the 2 old men are strong, Xiao Yang doesn't pay too much attention to them. For today's Xiao Yang, the half emperor no longer has any threat. The strength of the 2 old men in grey robes can be ignored. However, when Xiao Yang's eyes looked at the young man between the 2 old men carefully, his stretched eyebrows couldn't help but pick slightly, and he was surprised in his heart. In front of the young man's chest, there was a family badge, which was a symbol. It was a very common existence on the mainland. However, what surprised Xiao Yang was that the background of the family badge on the chest of the young man was a huge golden sword inserted into the sky, which was one of the 4 major gates and the symbol of Tianjian Gate. In other words, the family of the young man in front of him is one of the affiliated forces under the command of Tianjian Gate. Thinking of this, Xiao Yang couldn't help being slightly surprised. Unexpectedly, he was ready to hide in the mountains. He could still meet the forces under the 4 major sects. I have to say, it's really a narrow road for enemies. However, Xiao Yang is not interested in the young man in front of him. Let alone that his family is only the subsidiary strength of Tianjian Gate, Xiao Yang doesn't care about the strength of the young man at the moment. In order not to cause unnecessary trouble, Xiao Yang is too lazy to make trouble. Xiao Yang won't do this kind of loss business to solve a small minion and attract the attention of the 4 major departments. With his hands around his chest, Xiao Yang looked at the young man slowly coming forward, and there was no wave on his face. Although Xiao Yang has no scruples about the latter, it doesn't mean that those ordinary guests don't have it. At the moment, except Xiao Yang, other people who see the young man can't help but frown slightly. A pair of dignified eyes sweep over the 2 elders beside the young man, showing fear in their eyes. You know, in the Tongtian pavilion at the moment, in addition to Xiao Yang and the 2 old men next to the young man at the moment, the other 3 semi-emperors are actually the strongest, but also 4-star semi-emperors. This kind of strength, placed in front of the 2 grey-robed old men next to the middle-aged and young men, can only be described in 4 words: vulnerable. Therefore, with the emergence of young men, the original lively atmosphere in the field has quickly become silent. In Xiao Yang's indifferent eyes, the young man came forward slowly, but his eyes were staring at Xiao Yang, with a sneer in his eyes. Seeing the young man, the expression on the obscene young man's face on Xiao Yang's side also changed in an instant. He turned around and quickly bowed to the young man, but the result was that he was waved by the latter and blew out of the Tongtian pavilion. He didn't know whether he was alive or dead. Xiao Yang's eyes narrowed falsely. Looking at the young man's hand, his expression remained unchanged. There were some dark flashes in the depths of his pupils. I didn't expect that the gentle-looking young man would be so cruel when he started. After the obscene man was blown out of the Tongtian pavilion, the volume of map also fell into the hands of the young man. Holding the map, the young man's eyes have never left Xiao Yang's face. He seems to be observing something, but Xiao Yang ignores it, but at the same time, he can't help being curious. What does the young man want to see from his face? Do you mean? Thinking of some possibility, Xiao Yang's eyes suddenly coagulated slightly, and then quickly raised his eyes and looked at the young man with a slightly frightened eyes. Fortunately, after they silently observed each other for a long time, no one found anything. Unexpectedly, the young man applied the map in his hand to Xiao Yang, gently shook the rolled-up map in his hand, raised an inexplicable smile at the corners of his mouth, and smiled at Xiao Yang. "Oh, my friend, do you want to buy this map?" Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang could not help but frown slightly. After looking at the man up and down, he raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "Unfortunately, I just wanted to buy it. At the moment, I'm not interested." Hearing Xiao Yang's words, the young man couldn't help but frown and looked at Xiao Yang's eyes, showing some coldness, but in the end, he was perfectly pressed down. The man smiled blandly and took back his outstretched palm. The map was suspended in front of Xiao Yang out of thin air under his control. As long as he stretched out his hand, the map would fall into Xiao Yang's hands. "Hehe, it seems that my friend is reluctant to spend the money. In that case, I have the right to give you the map. How about it?" Surprised, Xiao Yang picked his eyebrows. For a moment, he didn't understand what medicine was sold in the gourd of the young man. At this moment, even the two old men in grey robes beside the young man could not help but frown slightly. They were also very surprised. Why the young man in front of us suddenly did so is not like his usual style. "Hehe, if I guess well, you must have something to trust. Since you have something, why bother to beat around the bush and speak frankly?" Xiao Yang's eyes narrowed and said in a flat tone, "Hehe, it seems that my friend is really a direct person. Since my friends say so, I won't go around in circles." The young man raised his eyes, looked at Xiao Yang with a joking smile, looked at Xiao Yang with 4 eyes, and then continued, "I can give you the map on my hand, but you have to take me to find Xiao Yang." The voice fell, and the expression on Xiao Yang's face was also solidified for it in an instant. As early as the young man saw Xiao Yang at the first sight, he had found the sneer in the latter's eyes when he looked at the obscene young man, and it was just because of this that he became a little curious about Xiao Yang. When he heard the news of 50,000 ling coin and Xiao Yang's serious injury, he was stunned immediately. Then he thought of the sneer held in the corner of Xiao Yang's mouth wearing a black robe, and his heart immediately had an idea. Although the news of the obscene man may not be true, in case Xiao Yang is really in the Shaolin Mountains, and his map happens to find Xiao Yang by mistake, and the black-robed youth in front of him happens to come to find Xiao Yang. In this way, put these pieces of information together. This map is true. Anyway, he has determined that the young man in black in front of him has a deep relationship with the guy named Xiao Yang. As long as he keeps him, he will be able to find Xiao Yang. As for now, it can only be a long gun in his hand. "Hehe, Your Excellency is joking. Can you believe that the map is true just by a word from the guy outside?" After a few breaths, Xiao Yang, who came back to his senses, couldn't help smiling at the young man opposite. He was too lazy to touch the volume of map in front of him. The reason why Xiao Yang said to buy it was just to tease the wretched young man, who asked him to cheat money everywhere with his name. Just looking at the current situation, it seems that the young man in front of him believed the guy's nonsense and thought the map was true. What my friend said is a little too serious. Now Xiao Yang is the number 1 in the western regions. Who doesn't want to find him? Although I'm skeptical about the news, there's not such a sentence that it's better to believe it or not. My child wants to see if this Xiao Yang is really hiding somewhere in the Shaolin Mountains. Smelling the speech, the man in the brocade robe smiled faintly, and his palm swayed gently in the void in front of him. The map folded in front of Xiao Yang also opened to the man with his back to Xiao Yang. The map is the content of Xiao Yang. Xiao Yang can't see it. In addition, it is deliberately blocked by young men. Therefore, even the exploration of Xiao Yang's soul power is isolated. Of course, Xiao Yang doesn't care about the map in front of him. Whether he sees it or not, it's just a fake after all. It can't play any role. In that case, sir, it's just to find Xiao Yang with this map. Why do you have to let me find him for you? The map is in hand. Instead of looking for a stranger, let the two next to you come out. I believe it should be much easier to do this with them. But today, I just want you to lead me. With a low cry, Xiao Yang said in front of him that the young man suddenly took a hand and grabbed it at Xiao Yang's shoulder. The green fighting spirit between the young people's palms quickly lingered. In the twinkling of an eye, he had come to Xiao Yang and grabbed it heavily on the latter's shoulder. Since I don't want to, why should you force people to be difficult? You and I are strangers, but you are so aggressive. It's really a bit overbearing. Facing the danger of power coming, Xiao Yang was unafraid. With a cold hum in his mouth, his body fell back and his toes touched the ground. His whole body suddenly turned into a leaf and retreated rapidly outside the Tongtian pavilion. Seeing that Xiao Yang is also a semi-emperor strong man, and seeing that his strength doesn't need to be weak at all, the man was surprised, but then came more affirmation. The black-robed young man in front of him is definitely not an ordinary person. With him, maybe he can really find Xiao Yang. You want to go? It's not that easy. You can come and go whenever you want in my young master's territory. Grey old man, stop him. The young man shouted and blurted out. The two old men in grey robes immediately moved together. In a twinkling, they only heard a violent bang. The gate of Tongtian Pavilion has been tightly closed. In the rear of Xiao Yang, the two old men in grey robes also appeared out of thin air, waved their palms together and patted Xiao Yang's descendants. Little friend, our young master sincerely invites you. Why don't you propose a toast? At the same time, one of them, an old man in grey robe, also spoke out in a deep voice to Xiao Yang. When the latter heard the speech, he sneered again and said sarcastically, "Why, that's the way you invite people? Don't talk nonsense with him. Since you don't want to stay, force him here. At that time, he will calm down and listen to us." Xiao Yang's voice just fell, but another old man in grey robes suddenly made a sound. His tone was undoubtedly colder than the former. "Oh, no wonder there are such arrogant young people. I'm afraid you can't teach anything good with your character." Xiao Yang sneered again. When the bombardment before and after was coming, Xiao Yang turned his body fiercely, and perfectly avoided the attack of the young man and the two old men in grey robes behind him from an extremely strange angle. Standing in the middle of the hall of Tongtian Pavilion, Xiao Yang still looked coldly at the three people in front of him. His eyes were filled with a little cold. Boy, I advise you to stay obediently. You can't leave until our young master determines the result of this matter. Otherwise, don't blame my two men for their ruthlessness. Oh, are you sure about the result? Are you sure about the result? Is Xiao Yang in the mountain range? It's ridiculous. The mountain range stretches tens of thousands of miles. It's very difficult for the strong to cross. Do you think it's possible for you to find someone in the mountain range? Hearing the words of the grey-robed old man, Xiao Yang sneered, and his face looked more and more cold. It seems that you won't cooperate. Xiao Yang had a sneer in his mouth and didn't answer. Boy, none of the people our young master wants to catch can't be caught up to now. Even if you are a semi-emperor, you can't think of the same. Oh. Well, in that case, let me be the first person. You want to die. When the cry fell, the two old men in grey robes rushed towards Xiao Yang and threw their fighting spirit in their hands. The terrible energy swept through the whole Tongtian pavilion, making the faces of the onlookers unable to help changing. 8.5-star emperors are really terrible. Facing a mere 4.5-star emperors with this strength is a kind of crushing. At this moment, the people in the field couldn't help but cast pity eyes on Xiao Yang. It's bad to provoke anyone, but this guy was provoked. This time, he was afraid to die. After a while, low sighs came and went one after another in the field, and everyone felt a little worthless for Xiao Yang's recklessness. They killed their lives in order to show off a few words. This is completely unwise. However, at the next moment, when everyone thought that Xiao Yang would die under the joint attack of the two grey-robed elders, Xiao Yang sneered. When the attack of the two 8.5-star emperors came, he quickly withdrew half a step backward, the soul power surged rapidly, and the formula in his hand changed. He immediately took a big mouth and paused for time. The roar like angry thunder resounded through the Tongtian pavilion. Huang Quan Tianyu. Moo. 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 The yellow spring's heavenly anger frightened the soul. It was displayed with the soul power of Xiao Yang's return to the same place. Its power was even more terrible. When he shouted out, the souls of the 2 8-star and half emperors were immediately hurt, so that their bodies were stunned on the way forward. Being absent-minded in war is a great taboo for practitioners. In this level of battle, it only takes a moment to determine the outcome of this war. Taking advantage of their absence, Xiao Yang suddenly stepped on the ground with the sole of his foot, and the great force spread under the sole of his foot. Xiao Yang's body has come between the bodies of the 2 elders. With one punch and 1 foot, they burst out with their own strength, and fell on the faces of the 2 old men in grey robes one after another. After a while, the faces of the 2 old men in grey robes became distorted, while the faces of the others in the field became distorted, and their eyes were full of unbelievable looks. When the fists and feet were taken back, the bodies of the 2 grey-robed elders immediately flew out of control in 2 directions, and immediately fell on one of the pillars of the Tongtian pavilion. They poured with great force and broke the pillars behind them. However, the 2 grey-robed elders couldn't help gushing a mouthful of blood from their mouths, and then woke up. His eyes were full of rage and looked at Xiao Yang. At this time, Xiao Yang also fell down, his hands lost behind him, his face was calm and could not afford waves, and even, at the corner of his mouth, he was vaguely wearing a little ironic smile. Son of a bitch, what are you proud of? You just beat me back by means. If you rely on your real strength, you are a waste. Seeing the sarcastic smile at the corner of Xiao Yang's mouth, an old man in grey robe immediately couldn't help but drink and scold. Oh. Speaking of waste, I think you two are. You've been practicing all your life before you reach the 8-star and a half emperor. If I'm waste, what are you? You. Make excuses and die for me. Being blocked by Xiao Yang's words, the 2 old men in grey robes suddenly became angry, and their palms slapped on the broken pillar behind them. After a while, their bodies turned into 2 grey lightning and rushed at Xiao Yang with the speed of chasing the stars and the moon. Oh. Seeing the 2 people rushing again, Xiao Yang raised a sneer at the corners of his mouth, took back his eyes and looked at the stunned young man on the opposite face. At the moment, the latter is extremely shocked and unimaginable. In front of him, this young man who looks about his age can beat back his bodyguard. You know, with the strength of the 2 grey-robed elders, once they join hands, even the 9-star and half emperor can't win it for a moment, but they can't think that they are so strong. Today, the first move is in the hands of this young man, and his cultivation is just like him. He is a 4-star and half emperor. Yes, the 4-star and half emperor. In order to avoid being recognized by some people at a glance, Xiao Yang had to suppress his strength and let his breath be in the 4-star and half emperor. He just didn't expect that, but he still couldn't avoid trouble. It's really troublesome to come to the door. You can't hide if you want to. Oh. It seems that if you want to solve them, you have to solve them first. Otherwise, it will be really troublesome today. Xiao Yang looked coldly at the young man opposite. He glanced at the 2 old people who were close to him on both sides. The palms under his sleeves and robes were raised slowly. The gorgeous different fire in the depths of his eyes condensed into a fire lotus and turned slowly. Seeing that Xiao Yang raised his palm to himself, the young man couldn't help but change his face slightly. The fighting spirit in his body was raised rapidly and his body moved, so he wanted to dodge and retreat violently. Seeing this, a sneer appeared at the corners of Xiao Yang's mouth. Oh. Can you run? The white palm was slowly lifted to the void in front of him, and his heart moved. In the middle of his eyebrows, the vast invisible terrorist soul force poured out at this moment, condensing a huge and incomparable palm over the young man's head. The huge palm moved with Xiao Yang's palm. Without help, he grabbed it at the young man below. Sky-step fighting skill, towering hand. With a low cry in his heart, Xiao Yang lifted to the empty palm and suddenly grasped it. At the same time, the huge invisible palm shrouded around the young man suddenly grasped it at the moment. In a twinkling, the young man among them was like a dead duck and was held in the palm by Xiao Yang. Ah! The scream of bone marrow pain suddenly came out, which changed the look on all the faces present at the moment, and the body shape of the 2 old men in grey robes who had rushed towards Xiao Yang was suddenly forcibly stopped in the void. Boy, you want to die. One of the 2 old men in grey robes looked at Xiao Yang coldly, and his dry palm suddenly raised. He wanted to come forward again. Hehe, Your Excellency has said this several times. Don't you understand what I mean? If you don't care about your master's life, just come. In this regard, Xiao Yang hissed coldly. His face was still plain as usual, but his palm was tightened again at the moment. With Xiao Yang's palm clenched, the young man who was held in the palm by the towering hand also turned pale on his face at the moment. Severe pain hit his whole body. The whole chest was squeezed so that he couldn't make a sound, and he became extremely afraid in his heart. Xiao Yang in front of him, but let him taste the greatest pain in his life. Boy, you are so mean. The grey-robed old man's face was dignified, his dry palms suddenly clenched into a fist, and his body was constantly fighting. A pair of turbid eyes were filled with endless anger and killing intention. If the young man wasn't in Xiao Yang's hand at the moment, I'm afraid they would have been impatient to kill Xiao Yang. Hehe, that's the same with each other. Compared with me, I'm afraid it's more excessive for you to bully the young with the old and bully the little with the more. Besides, as long as you don't do it, I'll never kill him. Of course, if you want him to die, you don't have to take my words to heart, just come. Xiao Yang's eyes were cold, and he looked at the two old people on both sides with cold eyes. Boy, do you know who he is? If you dare to kill him today, the forces behind him will certainly break you to pieces, frustrate you and avenge him. Seeing that Xiao Yang was so domineering, the two old men in grey robes were helpless. Although they restrained their fighting spirit, they were unwilling to give in at all. Cough. I'm son. All right, you grandson, you can't talk here. Shut up. The voice of the old man in the grey robe fell, and the young man controlled by the towering hand also insisted to speak, but unfortunately, he was interrupted by Xiao Yang, and holding his towering hand was forced again, which made his bones click all over his body, and there were already many boneheads, which broke in response because he couldn't bear the terrible force. You. Get out. You too, get out of the door now. When I leave, I will naturally let him go. Hearing Xiao Yang's shrill cry, the two old men in grey robes suddenly showed anger on their faces, but when they thought of the young man controlled by Xiao Yang, they had to drink and scold helplessly, and then they wanted to go out of the door. But at this time, Xiao Yang's cold drink came again. Why, don't you understand what I mean? I mean, it's not walking out to ask you to get out of the door. The voice in Xiao Yang's mouth fell. In Tongtian Pavilion, not only the two old men in grey robes, but also the other onlookers could not help but lag slightly at the moment. In a flash, the two old men in grey robes came back to their senses. The look on an old face quickly became gloomy. The fighting spirit that had just converged in the body also gushed out of the body surface again. One of them was even ready to fight against Xiao Yang again. However, the next thing that came was the very sad hiss of the young man. Boy, don't go too far. Hearing the sad roar from the youth's mouth again, the look on the faces of the two old men in grey robes changed again. Although they were extremely angry in their hearts, they had no choice but to do nothing because the young man was in Xiao Yang's hands at the moment. At this moment, even the people in the hall who were watching the changes in the field could not help but cast an amazing look at Xiao Yang. No one could have imagined that this young-looking man in black robe was such a bad lord. I'm afraid it was difficult for the three semi-imperialist strong men present to do so. At least, the three of them have no ability to repel the 8-star and a half emperor. Although Xiao Yang's move just now has a lot of opportunistic elements, it does not affect people's view of his ability. After all, no matter what means Xiao Yang uses, as long as he can defeat the 8-star and a half emperor, it is enough to show his strong ability. Too much? I haven't said to kill him yet. Do you think it's too much? If you want me to go too far, I don't mind killing him now. For the cold words of the grey-robed old man, Xiao Yang smiled coldly, took back his outstretched palm in front of him, and wanted to hold it hard in front of the two grey-robed old men. Stop. We are from the Sun family. If you dare to kill him, the Sun family will not let you go. At that time, even the whole western region will have no place for you. You have to think about whether to kill him or not. Seeing that Xiao Yang was really going to kill, the look on the faces of the two old men in grey robes suddenly changed dramatically, and they quickly shouted at Xiao Yang. Oh! However, the old man in grey robe heard this in Xiao Yang's ears, but he received the latter's sneer, and he was not afraid of the Sun family that the old man in grey robe said. Long before he came, Xiao Yang knew something about the so-called Sun family. The Sun family is one of the affiliated forces of Tianjian Gate, and also one of the 4 family forces under its command. Its family power is strong, and there are strong people at the level of fighting emperor. With Tianjian Gate as its backer, the Sun family can be regarded as a terrorist existence in the western regions. However, although the Sun family is strong, it has no deterrent in front of Xiao Yang. As for whether he hates or not, Xiao Yang doesn't care. The Sun family, as an affiliated force of the Tianjian sect, has a desperate attitude towards Xiao Yang. Even if they are not enemies with them now, they will meet them sooner or later. Since they will meet sooner or later, why care about this moment? As for the strong man of fighting emperor, although the Sun family has fighting emperor, don't forget that there is such a terrible old monster as Guyo in Xiao Yang's body. Xiao Yang believes that as long as he is there, even if the strong man of fighting emperor comes, he can't kill him. Since you don't care about his life or death, don't blame me. Xiao Yang chuckled. Immediately after that, his white palm wanted to hold it tightly. At the same time, the white face of the young man controlled by the towering hand became like a piece of white paper. The red blood was squeezed from the pores of the young man's body. In a short time, the young man was dyed into a blood man. The shrill scream sounded like a wolf howling. However, under Xiao Yang's means, it was no help for the young man to struggle hard. As for the two old men in grey robes, they looked at the bloody young man with an iron-blue face, and the look on their face was also struggling. As the 8-star-and-a-half emperor strong men, they can be regarded as the real existence walking sideways in the periphery of Shilin mountain range, but that's it. Today, they even eat and shrivel in the hands of a 4-star-and-a-half emperor boy, which really makes them feel very ashamed and angry. But in their anger, the two old men in grey robes were also quite helpless. Now, if they want to save young men, they must lose their face and roll out of the Tongtian pavilion to the street for ridicule. With the dignity of their two elders, they can't do such a thing, but if they don't, the young man will end up dead. Boy, if you put down my young master now, I dare to promise that I will let you go. Otherwise, if you want us to get out of the door, I will cramp you today. I want you to be locked in my son's dungeon forever, so that you can't survive or die. One of the two old men in grey robes stepped forward and stared at Xiao Yang fiercely. A pair of grey pupils were full of endless killing intention. Today, no matter which way Xiao Yang chooses, he must die here. Oh, it seems that you don't intend to save your master. In that case, don't blame me for being cruel. The voice of cold words just came out, and Xiao Yang raised his palm fiercely. Then, in the frightened eyes of the two old men in grey robes, he smashed it down to the ground below. Boom! With the violent bang, a strong dust swept rapidly in all directions under the package of the airwave. The whole Tongtian pavilion trembled violently at this moment. Everyone in it changed his face sharply at this moment, showed his fighting spirit in his body, turned his body, and retreated and left towards the outside of Tongtian pavilion. The look on the faces of the two old men in grey robes could not help but change again. They did not expect that even if they had shown their identity, the man in black robes in front of them was still indifferent, which made them angry in their hearts. At the same time, they were more and more worried about the situation of the young man at the moment. When the storm dispersed, in front of everyone, the original magnificent Tongtian pavilion had been destroyed and turned into a pile of ruins. In the center of the ruins, there is a vacant land with a diameter of more than 10 feet. In the vacant land, Xiao Yang, the two old men in grey robes, and the young man who is still controlled in the hands of the sky stand impressively among them. Xiao Yang's black robe was still as new, his face was calm, and there was no wave in his dark eyes. There was a little indifference between his looks. When the two old men in grey robes saw this scene, their eyes quickly fell on the young man controlled by the towering hand. Seeing that the latter was healthy, they breathed a sigh in their hearts. The two old men looked at each other. Immediately, they looked at Xiao Yang. One of the old men frowned and bit his teeth. His lips and teeth collided several times reluctantly. Then they said to Xiao Yangshan with an iron face, "Boy, are you sure you'll give me people back alive after I get out of here? As long as you can do it, I will never break my promise." Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang also replied solemnly to them, "Why should we trust you? Because you have no choice, unless you really want to see him die at my hands." The words came out of Xiao Yang's mouth. The two old men immediately frowned and looked at each other. Only after a long time did they bite their teeth and speak to Xiao Yang again, saying, "Well, I hope you can abide by what you say, otherwise, I will keep you here forever today." Xiao Yang smiled, but nodded. Then he stretched out his left hand and made an invitation gesture to them. His tone was not urgent or slow. "Well, please, get out. This video will end here."